Welcome to the Kick It Open podcast, where we celebrate bold moves and reveal the strategies shaping success in the wealth management industry. Our goal is to inspire you to kick the doors open on your personal success. I'm your host, Shelby Nickel. Today's guest is Brooklyn Brock. She is a third-generation financial advisor and founder of Ellevate Advisors. Her firm specializes in financial planning and exit planning for advisors themselves. So Brooklyn, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shelby. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I am so interested in your history in this industry. You have spent your entire life, like literally, around financial advising. And after years in the industry, then you formed your own firm that serves financial advisors. Tell us about your journey growing up and about your firm, Ellevate Advisors.
You know, that's a great question. Going back in my mind, play the musical chime. Back in the day, in the 80s, I guess I would say, my granddad actually started in the profession with a broker-dealer, and he did his own financial plan and decided that he wanted to be able to save for retirement so that he would not have to rely on the sale of his business when he needed to retire. So the goal in doing that is that he could gift the business to his two sons. In 2000, he offered to my dad and uncle that if they both gave up their careers and moved back to little old Tulsa, Oklahoma, that he would give them each half of the business. So my family moved to Tulsa when I was 10. I had no idea all of this stuff was going on in the background, but I worked part-time at the family business throughout high school and college. And during that time, they were transitioning client relationships. I think it took them about 14 years for my dad and uncle to pass all of the exams. You know, they had to get the CFP and all of the licenses to operate in the BD world and everything, and then learn all of the products and meet all of the clients. So they had more than enough time to do that. Everything was going really well. I graduated from college in 2013, and I had double majored in international economics and French. My goal was to move to France, but I decided that I would have a better quality of life if I stayed in the States and created a career for myself, and then went back and bought a place in France someday in the future. So that's still one of my major life goals. But when a position opened up at my family's firm, you know, I've been working there on and off. So I went ahead and took that position, and I had no idea what financial planning was. I was there for about 5 years. I worked my way up. I became a CSA, and then I started passing those licensing exams. I started studying for the CFP, and I started to sit in on client meetings. And I started to understand what financial planning really was. And I was really excited because I thought this is something that's very practical that I would love to pass on to my kids. And I just found it really fascinating. And my dad and uncle struggled with a number of things in the business. As my granddad got older, there was a client who filed a complaint for not having the appropriate disclosures made when a product was sold. And then my dad and uncle started working with a business coach because my granddad was supposed to retire, and a year would go by and he's not supposed to come in on Fridays. Another year would go by, he's not supposed to come in on Thursdays. 3 years later, he's still coming in 5 days a week. And then a team member was let go because of some leadership discrepancies in the office. And her husband was an attorney, so we got lucky and they sued us. So it was becoming a problem having my granddad in the office. So I, at that point, was like not super excited about waiting around for if and when a succession plan with me may or may not happen. So I went and got some outside of the family business experience. And that was one of the most difficult things that I ever had to talk to my dad about, because I had been with him as a huge part of his support network as he was trying to replace my granddad. They have very different management styles. But also there was an advisor on the team one weekend who had a stroke and never came back to work. And I had been the key support person, with my dad taking over his 100 or so clients, households. And we had about a 99% client retention rate after 12 months. And that was a lot of the relationship building that we did. I supported like 300 households, a dozen or so retirement plans. So it was a big deal to be like, okay, bye, see ya. Um,
Yeah.
that was really hard. I remember it really clearly. And my dad told me that he wanted what was best for me. And if that meant leaving the family business, then he wanted to empower me to be able to do that. And I remember that, among a number of other things, as just being one of the blessings of getting to work with my dad, and how much I learned from him about being a fiduciary, a good advisor, a good leader, a number of things. So I really valued the time that I spent working with my family. But soon after I left, all of these issues were going on, and my dad and uncle, with the help of the consultant, decided to change the locks on the business doors one day. And January 1st came around. Granddad could not get into the office. So they sat down and had a meeting and said, we will pay you a consulting fee of this much per year. And we will come have a business meeting at your house every weekend. And you'll not come into the office anymore. So you can still stay connected, like golf with clients or whatever, see clients at church, but not be involved in the business anymore. So they did that. And a few years later, my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he and my uncle decided to sell the business and retire early. And thanks to all the hard work that my granddad had done, they were able to just sell the business within, I think, 6 months of that diagnosis. And they had enough for their own retirement, even pulling it forward 10 or 15 years earlier than they expected. So that's been huge for my family. And a part of that was saying, okay, does Brooke want to buy any of this business? Because I had been really closely working with a lot of the families that I grew up going to church with and stuff. So we identified about $1 million worth of the business that I could come back and buy, but I had already started Ellevate to help advisors through transitions like these. And being fee only, I would have had to shut that down to go back to the fee only world, or to the broker dealer world. So I said no, and my dad and granddad and everyone talked, and they agreed that it didn't have to stay as a family business anymore. That the legacy would continue on in the business that I have. It just looks different now than it did when my granddad started it. So we've come together as a family a lot more now that a few years have gone by since my dad's Parkinson's diagnosis, and he's doing really well. He basically retired to work out full time because that's what keeps Parkinson's at bay. So he's still doing really well. And we're like a happy, more cohesive family now, I would say. But it's definitely been an interesting journey.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you saw so many elements of what happens over the lifetime and life cycle of a practice. I mean, you saw lawsuits and client complaints and the things that just are daily activities of business ownership often, and then the difficulty of a succession plan at times too. And it's a classic story. I've done many podcasts about it already, and that have talked about an elder advisor and not really wanting to completely step away from the business. I mean, that is a very common story.
Mm-hmm.
It seems as if, like, in each of these situations, there is a reason and a rationale to sort of know about the value of the business. And you and I were talking off camera about how so many advisors don't necessarily understand value of their business or plan for the value of their business. They plan for compensation increases. They plan to hit the next element on the pricing grid, let's call it, or the comp grid, but they don't necessarily plan for the value of their enterprise. Can we just talk a little bit about that? Like, what do you talk to advisors when you're talking about valuation?
Oh, that's a big one. So the exercise of getting a valuation is helpful, I think, for advisors to understand the value of what they built. Sometimes advisors have an unrealistically high expectation, so that can be a helpful objective exercise. But sometimes they have a relatively low expectation, or if they're thinking about an internal succession plan, they may want to not charge as much as they would if they were to auction it off to the highest bidder, because they know the person on the other side of the deal. So doing that valuation together can help that G2 person develop an ownership mentality and really understand more deeply the factors that influence a valuation and what buyers are looking for, because those are kind of two different sets of criteria. So things that often influence the valuation kind of formula that we see are things like average age of clients, percent of relationships developed with the next generation, how your revenue is structured, how much is coming from AUM versus financial planning, all of these good things. Other things that buyers look for would be, is G2 developed enough to have relationships with the clients if the founder steps away? Mm-hmm. And is the team cohesive and able to deliver the service without that advisor? Are the clients trained? Are they going to transition well? So those are some of the more difficult things to measure. But that's what when we think about like valuation and enterprise value, and you're really building a business, the idea of a business is that it can exist without you. So that's what we're looking for across the valuation and kind of developing an enterprise per se.
Yeah, and I think that's even kind of a mind shift for some advisors, right? And so I think about a lot of advisors that I know who have grown up perhaps inside of a broker-dealer world, right? And they were, you know, again, hitting that next level on the comp grid or whatever, right? They're always kind of trying to get into the top 25 or the top 100 advisors, or, you know, some metric of competitive standard, but they haven't had to sort of run the business as a business in the same way. And what is interesting about like your home story of your family business is that at these crossroads, the business needed to be run like a business, and somebody had to step in and do that.
100%. It's something that I see advisors at broker-dealers struggling with. It's not that you can't run a real business at a broker-dealer, but when you're incentivized to reach a certain payout grid, you do things differently than you would if you were focused on delivering a certain level of client service and charging a certain fee to compensate yourself for that. It's just a different idea of what it means to run a business. And I don't know, it changes, I think, people's happiness at the end of the day when they think about what incentivizes them and what's a good fit for their values and their life.
And it's easy to fall back on the numbers because it's a metric. And things that are measurable are, you know, what's the phrase? Things that are measurable get done, right? And so it's a really easy metric to fall on when you don't have something else that is sort of purpose-driven, kind of driving you, perhaps. You talk some about how every advisor should be exit planning, right? And at least have a continuity plan. I have also been working with some advisors who are kind of midlife, but maybe similar to your father in that kind of in the prime of their lives, really in their peak earning years, so to speak, and they get some scary health news. They might have thought they had decades of time ahead of them, and then something happens. When that happens, it sounds like in your case with your family business that the business was fairly prepared and ready kind of for sale and decisioning. Is that just how they ran it all the time? Or was that because of the succession plan with your grandfather? How could people do a better job of that?
You know, that's a great question. Let's see. It's something that I get asked, not just from mid-career advisors, but also advisors who are going out on their own or just joining the profession and developing their book of clients. The truth is that someday each of us as advisors will exit. And whether it happens unexpectedly or on schedule, either way, it's going to happen. So it's something that I personally feel that every advisor should be prepared with okay, if something happens to me and I have 2 clients, who's going to step in and take care of those 2 clients? If I have 200 clients, who's stepping in for them? And this is part of what I think of goes into the definition of being a fiduciary. And when I think about the status of a lot of advisors out there not having a plan like that at any age or stage, I mean, it falls back on their life partner, their spouse typically, who usually has no experience in the business to pick up the pieces and to figure it out. So we often work with advisors to develop a hit by the bus workflow, if you will. So advisors thinking about an exit, if it's going to happen quickly, what kind of a hit by the bus workflow would you want to have just written down of like, okay, first call so-and-so, my compliance consultant, then call so-and-so, and this is what you do about billing, and this is like what you don't say to clients, or this is what you do say to clients. You can write out all of that stuff down in advance. So that's something that we really recommend. And if you really have nothing and the thought of that is a bit overwhelming, just start with like a refer away list of a list of advisors that you would even personally trust to do your own financial plan. And just put them down. Your team or spouse or whoever can at least get that list to clients and say, okay, work with these people.
Yeah, it
if
sounds
nothing better's in place.
What you were describing reminds me of my corporate days, and we would have called that almost like a disaster recovery plan, right?
Yeah.
And it is kind of like if you got hit by a bus, what would happen? And I think it's absolutely fair to expect that people should have that type of thing written down. I always tell advisors, not only are you a fiduciary for your clients, or in many cases they are, you're also a fiduciary of your own life. And yes. It is your business at that point too. And if you get hit by a bus, like, let's make sure we have a plan so that the value that you created continues for your family, that you have a continuity, plan in place, and somebody is going to buy your practice or at least help, right? And you're not just scrambling to take it over. So yeah, I like that idea of the hit by the bus plan, and like, here's what the people in the office need to do first, second, third. Like, that seems, it can be overwhelming to create that, but it seems pretty doable. Just saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's like an estate plan for your business per se.
Yes.
Like, you need to just play through in your mind what would actually happen and write down, like, if you could be there, what would you tell someone to do? And that way it's actionable, and there's going to be a lot of things that come up that you didn't expect. But it's better than having nothing, even if it's not perfect.
Yeah. So then let's turn to the kind of maybe more traditional exit plan, right? I'm an elder stateswoman. I don't know. What do we say? Statespeople? I'm not sure. But an elder advisor, and I am finally retiring. I just don't. I actually kind of like want to stay at work forever. I know I personally do feel that way at times. But I hear so many advisors who are just, going to die at their desk, et cetera. How can they maybe more proactively plan for an exit? You're a SEPA. I'm a SEPA. I know part of this answer, but talk about your experience with advisors. How do we get them to be more proactive about their own retirement?
No, I refer to the advisors who are speaking of as more mature advisors.
Yeah. Thank you for the language. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it could be a touchy subject, but like, we don't like to talk about it, about retirement planning at Ellevate. Like, sometimes we have to use the R word, but usually we call it a transition plan. So it's not so scary. And I mean, to your point, if you want to continue working, this is one of the few professions where you can. You don't have to be like, and now you're out. Like, it's so flexible. You can create whatever you want that to look like. Advisors love what they do. And I think one of the biggest hurdles, like my granddad faced, is not having a purpose or identity outside of work. So when we work with advisors, we're working on the business transition, but also on the personal side of the transition, and talking about what that next chapter can look like We do a lot of like vision exercises. We talk about the feelings that are coming up as the transition is happening. But we also encourage advisors to think about what their phased retirement or phased transition plan could look like. It doesn't have to be full stop, like 100% vested. Now you're done.
Yes.
No, it can be like, okay, today you do these things, and by this time you want to be doing these things that you love, and just like whittle it down just to the things that you love to do. We can have a plan to get there, and we can get the whole team on board and excited about what that can look like. So that's something that we explore, and we like to tie that to specific timelines. And the advisor or selling advisor has to buy into that plan. Some end up doing it on their own, and they're like, this is what I want. We're executing it. Everyone's on board. We just need help, like technically negotiating the deal terms or something. That's great. If you can do it on your own, that's great. I would say it's one of the difficult things that advisors struggle with the most, because it's hard to see yourself objectively. It's doing that interior work. So I think that's the first one. Something else is that advisors worry a lot about what happens to their clients. A lot of advisors have really close relationships with their clients. So we do a friends exercise if an advisor is struggling with this, to identify clients that you do want to maintain a relationship with outside of work, and come up with some ideas about how to intentionally engage with that person without stepping on G2's toes as they're taking over the working engagement.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the fun exercises we get to do. The third thing is, my granddad, one of his reasons for like not retiring on schedule was that he didn't know if he would really be able to afford it. Like, he knew he had saved, but he hadn't updated his financial plan since the 80s. So my dad and uncle got someone from the back office who is not related to us to do a financial plan. And my granddad did have enough to retire, and they could allay some of those very real fears. So there are different practical ways to approach whatever those roadblocks are. We just need support and permission, I think, to tackle those things. Usually we're in the seat of giving advice, but we also need someone to do that for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have heard many advisors don't kind of properly plan, and they still have so much of their own value into the business. But especially in a position like with your grandfather, where perhaps they're selling or gifting it to family members, then how do they sort of harvest value at the same time? And how does that all feel fair to them? You know, speaking of that, I do want to talk a little bit about family businesses very specifically. Obviously, you grew up in one, and it was interesting. I had Becca Hajar from Commonwealth on my podcast a few months ago, and she mentioned that 40% of the businesses on the Commonwealth platform were family businesses. They had some relative, could have been a niece or nephew, father, son, daughter, son, whatever it was. How many kind of family businesses are you working with? Because I know there's just a lot of them in this industry. And when you're working with a family business transition, what are the specific nuances of that?
Yeah, I love this question. I mean, with my background, I think about 20% of our clients are family advisory firms. It's definitely more complex, but I think that makes it more fun. I like the challenge. And succession planning, in my mind, is something that hopefully strengthens the family bonds. I saw that when I was working with my family, is that we had this whole nother layer of communication. And we got to the point where, like, me and my dad were finishing each other's sentences, for example. And I have a deeper relationship with my dad than any of my other siblings do. And I would have loved to see the same care and attention given to developing a succession plan with me as had gone into my granddad's, transitioning to the next generation. And maybe they could have gotten there, but I think when it's done well, it can bring a family together, and it can be really beautiful. One of the hurdles is that parents have a hard time seeing their children as ready.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you're my baby, you know?
I'm not sure if that's just parents or if that is just like the older generation in general seeing younger generations. Yes.
Yeah, we see it across the board with all of our clients. It can be a problem, but it's more so when, like, one of my first clients was a mom and she was trying to transition to her son, and like, she like pushed that baby out, right? Like, it's a different level of relationship. So, one of the things that we try to do is create a safe place, a safe space for accountability to making progress and making mistakes and sharing the emotions that are coming up, but objectively defining when is someone ready enough. And we do that exercise whether it's a family business or not. If this is a problem, this is what we're working through. But sometimes it can be more emotionally driven when it's family, or more personal, like, well, I happen to know that they responded this way 10 years ago about this thing that I said on vacation. It's just different. There's so many more layers. So um, we also want to be asking the question of, is keeping the business and the family truly what's best for everyone, the clients, everyone in the family? That was something that my dad and I thought a lot about, because in proving to keep the business together instead of selling a portion to me and a portion to the other advisors who were on the team, when they went and were putting the whole thing up for sale as one, they could get a higher price, which did actually make a difference. That wasn't their top success criteria. They didn't sell to the highest bidder, but they were able to get a higher multiple because the business is worth more as one than it is piece by piece. So that was something that we intentionally thought about. I wish that there could have been someone to think through these things even before I left. The coach that my family worked with didn't work this way. I feel like the service that we developed is pretty new. And so I wish that my dad had had someone like me to work with back in the day. But there's not a magical silver bullet. It's just getting vulnerable and committing to the process and processing the emotions and buying into what that next chapter looks like. And usually, just like giving birth to a baby, there's like this big push with a succession plan, even more so with a family business, where it's like, there's going to be a part that's really painful. We're here for you to talk through the emotions. You don't have to go through it alone. But there's a part of just like getting through that. It's easier when you have people in your court.
Yeah, absolutely. And that advocacy is so important, whether you're making a change from a broker dealer to another or going RIA, right? Some of this work that I do, or it's so important during this transition time period. You know, one of the things that I learned from you is that you work with both buyers and sellers. When you do that, are you meaning that you do that on the same transaction, or is it that sometimes you're working with the buyer or sometimes with the seller? Talk about that, and how does that improve the process?
Yes. We do work with buyers and sellers on the same transaction. That's one of the ways in which we identify our service as being holistic. Like I mentioned earlier, we're working on the personal transition and the business transition. That's one aspect of being holistic. The other is that we are helping the buyers advocate for themselves and the sellers advocate for themselves. And we're also advocating holistically for client outcomes, that we're taking care of clients at the end of the day. And I think this is one of the reasons that our process works so well, actually, is that it's different. We are paid hourly, not based on a percentage of the sale. That changes how we're incentivized to work, is to really be there for as much or as little as the advisors need support throughout the whole process. So each engagement looks very different. It's customized to what they are struggling with. And if they don't need something, we skip right over it, problem solved. But if we need to take more time or pause on something, we can do that. And I love that we can prioritize the client care as a success metric, because it puts the buyer and the seller on the same side of the table. working towards the deal together. It becomes a collaborative effort. Instead of being on the other side of the table, like negotiating against each other, it brings everyone together, and that makes it a much more pleasant experience. Because you end up working on a succession plan for years. It doesn't happen overnight. So it should be fun as much as it can be.
I love that you said that a succession may take years and you can work on it together with the advisors for years. One of the models that I've seen has been a model where an advisor, the buyer, is buying tranches of the business over time. What are some of the models that maybe you have seen that have been most successful for those buyers and sellers and for that client especially?
Yes. I love the idea of tranches. 100% agree with that. I mean, when I'm doing a financial plan for an advisor, especially when they're like in their midlife stage, we don't always know what the succession plan is going to look like. So you get the value of the business, you assign a conservative growth rate, you put in a buy-sell transaction. It's going to be a lump sum paid out over 5 years. That's not tranches. But it can be tranches. Maybe when you get there, instead of doing 100% paid over 5 years, you do a tranche of 20% a year for 5 years. So it gives you the flexibility to change it after the first tranche or the second tranche.
Yes.
So that can be really attractive. I don't see very many deals getting done where it's all lump sum, especially if it's an internal succession plan. But I had a client who did the most fascinating thing I had never heard of until this spring, where he bought into her employer's firm. I think it was just like 5 or 10%, like tranche style. And this year we had analyzed if she should buy another 5 or 10%. And her husband is 10 years older than she is, and she's in her 50s. So she and her husband she'll probably work a little bit longer. But she doesn't want to work much longer. And the founder she's buying from is also maybe 10, 15 years older than her. So they may end up going together, if you will. And so it wasn't really going to be a great ROI for her to buy in another tranche. So they actually came up with this fantastic idea, working with their accountant and their attorney. And I hope that this passes muster. They're still doing the final review. Nothing is executed yet. But they are adding on to that initial sale and filing an 83B election, so that, if I can explain this correctly, not being a tax expert, instead of it just having been 5 or 10% that she purchased, she's adding on an additional 5%, but it's retaining the cost basis that the seller had initially. And so she'll just have to pay capital gains when she sells, but they're attributing that additional percentage to the deal that she's already signed up to pay for, because she has another few years on the installment sale. So that's a fascinating way to incorporate an element of sweat equity onto an existing initial tranche. I'm curious to see if that does get approved. They're running it by the accountant and tax experts now, but I'd never heard of that before. That's fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what's so interesting about this business too, is that there is a lot still happening in this space. We're seeing new models being established all the time, new models for how we can sell practices and buy practices, and how we can wind down a career in a way that is less all at once and more over time, so that it's more comfortable for us. I had Stevie Green on my podcast in early January of this year, and she also talked about becoming the servicing advisor behind the scenes for a set of advisors. And so the advisor still owns the business, but her firm, Stevie's firm, is servicing all of those clients and taking care of them, and then has first rights to buy that book of business later. But it was a nice way for the existing advisor, that mature advisor, to start to wind down their workload a little bit without having to completely exit and without having to give up all control at the front end.
I love that creative solution as well. It's so much fun to come up with out-of-the-box ideas.
Are you a financial advisor ready for a big leap? Making the decision to leave your firm, whether it's a broker-dealer or an RIA, can feel like stepping into the unknown. Muriel Consulting provides personalized, unbiased support to help you navigate transformational career moves with confidence and confidentiality. Schedule a discovery call at murielconsulting.com. MURIEL consulting.com.
We are about to the end of our time together. I know it's shocking because we could talk about SEPA stuff and exit planning stuff and personal planning stuff for a very, very long time. One of the things I really wanted to cover today, though, was how you help people who are just overwhelmed at the idea of thinking about succession. We know that can feel so huge to advisors. What is your kind of best advice for somebody who just feels overwhelmed thinking about it, but they do need to do something?
Yeah, I think there are 3 things that I could say someone could do, because we can't just delay and say next year. Even if it's starting small, we need to start earlier than we think we need to. So 3 ways to get started. Start with doing your continuity plan, that referral wait list, that hit by the bus workflow. I like to harp on quite a bit how much doing your continuity plan is a practice run for succession. Like, you can whip out that continuity plan once you have your team in place and be like, and now I'm taking a sabbatical and you guys have got this covered, and just practice for the days when you're not going to be here. It doesn't have to all rely on you. You're allowed to breathe and to take a vacation. So get that continuity plan in place and practice it. There is a succession readiness template on our website. If you're thinking like, no, not continuity, I want to really, succession is my focus. People can purchase that. There's just a version for sellers, and then there's just a version for buyers, and then there's a version that includes both. So someone could download that, and it asks you about 100 to 150 questions, and you walk away with like, okay, this is the list of things that I need to do, because it generates the action related to how you answered that question. So that can be like an actionable kind of a hit list to start with, if you will. But the third thing I would say is to find someone to talk to. We've talked today, Shelby, about how hard it is to go through a succession plan alone. And it really shouldn't be that way. There are so many internal processing points of like what we're thinking and feeling and how we respond to something someone says, that you really have to develop your network of people, friends, other advisors who have sold their businesses, advisors who are thinking about selling their businesses, but also people outside of the profession. There aren't very many advisors who are like, my spouse loves to talk about my business before we're getting ready for bed. You know, it's not very common. You can and should talk to your spouse because this impacts them as well. But you're going to need other peers to talk to. And that's something that Tiffany and I on the succession team are always happy to do. People can just book a call with us and get an opinion. And and then we can go from there. That's my initial thoughts, at least.
I love it. I think that's so important to just reach out where you need the expertise. And this is an area where if you've never done a succession plan for yourself before, you cannot be an expert in it. None of us can be experts in something that we have never done for sure, or who have done one time ever, right? So
right.
Come see you and let you be that expert advisor for them. To finish off our conversation today, I always end with these kind of quick hit little fun questions. So first thing that comes to mind is the way to answer this, right? We just want it to be quick. What is the last thing or latest thing that you've used ChatGPT for?
Confession time. I have never used ChatGPT.
What?
Yeah. My team helps me. They put all kinds of things through ChatGPT. I think they use it for marketing, and all kinds of things like generating client deliverables. Even it's like, okay, throw this into ChatGPT to give me something to start with, and then we'll edit it and clean it up and customize it.
Yes.
But just for like the bulk of the work. I know it's something that my team relies heavily on, but I guess that's a mark of how well I have done at delegating things is that
That's wonderful.
I don't actually use ChatGPT.
All right. Well, what is a favorite kind of book or podcast that you are loving right now? Doesn't have to be work related, can be if you want.
I am currently trying to brush up on my French degree from years ago, and I'm reading the graphic novel version of Anne Frank in French. And it is fascinating. I'm loving it. I don't know, just it's good to get another perspective of what's important in life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I've always said that I will learn French when I retire. And my husband's always like, why wait? But anyway.
So I agree with your husband. We should talk more about that later.
All right. What is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
I remember when I was launching Ellevate. I remember when I was studying for the CFP years and years ago. And I had expectations about what life was going to look like, what it would feel like to work with clients that were mine, not my family's clients or supporting another advisor, but like my clients. And it 100% looks different than I could have ever expected. And whatever you have planned, it's not going to turn out that way. And in some respects, it's going to be a million times better. And there's a certain element of just letting go and trusting other people and embracing change. And I want to never lose sight of that embracing change. I think that's one of the things that helps people stay happy in life is like, and now, today didn't go as expected, but it's a great day anyway. I want to have that attitude.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think that's a really lovely statement, especially given, the conversation about exit, et cetera. I love that so much. All right. I almost want to just end right there, but we always, because this is the Kick It Open podcast, we always have to ask you, what is a door that you are kicking open right now?
I wonder how people answer that question. I guess maybe delete this in the recording, but I don't know that I'm going to answer it in the traditional sense. If this isn't right, tell me and I can re-answer it. One thing I am so excited that feels to me like we're kicking doors open is that we were invited to speak at Bob Vira's Insider Forum this fall. And for the first time ever, I'm doing a co-presentation with my associate coach, Tiffany Lee. And she and I are going to go together. And when I launched, Ellevate was supposed to be a fee-only RIA, and we only accept advisors as clients. And she has been so monumental in creating this non-traditional succession service that did not exist. I could never have imagined that it could be like this. It would not exist without her. She's fantastic and crucial to the delivery of this service, and the clients love her so much. And the fact that we can go together and present on this, she has a therapy background in music therapy, and it feels like she could never have dreamed of doing this as a career if I hadn't kind of embraced her and challenged her. And then we built this service together, and it feels like we're getting in there with our teeth and we're like, we're going to do it. We're going to change the world. And like, now we get to go out there and be in front of people and talk about something that didn't exist 5 years ago. And like, I wouldn't be here without her, but she wouldn't be here without me. And we're changing the world. It feels big.
Oh, I love that answer. That is the best answer. And I can't think of a better answer to that question. This idea that you get to have such agency over yourself and to create something that you are able to believe in, and to do it with somebody who has passion and similarity and love for it also. That is absolutely kicking a door open. And for all of our listeners, I hope that story inspires you also to kick a door open of whatever that might be for you, sharing something new, writing something new, making a new recipe, whatever it is, just to keep that excitement and to bring something that only you can to the world. So until next time, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening to the Kick It Open podcast. The Kick It Open podcast is hosted and developed by Muriel Network. Kick It Open is produced by Shelby Nickel, edited by Aaron Sherman, graphic design by John Gallagher. If you found today's podcast valuable, please help us out by subscribing and sharing with your friends. Just click that little plus sign or the follow button wherever you get your podcasts.